Yeah. So what we're seeing is testimonials that run the like from head to toe, literally. So like you're talking about hair and not being gray where everybody else in your family is. Great. Like, there's the potential that you just lucked out in the genes. There's also the likelihood that you're taking really good care of your health and that MyVitalC is helping there. So there's the head. We've actually got testimonials. It's an interesting testimonial of a former Navy SEAL, pre-SEAL, when he was 5 years old. A crab bit his big toe and cracked his big toe. And he shared with us that he had that cracked toe from 5 years old. I think it was probably into his 60s. And then he starts taking the formula, and now his toe has healed at that advanced age. Like, that's just so literally we have testimonials from head to toe. And as we're looking at those testimonials, as we're sharing those with people out there, and as people are looking at the research and saying, "Hey, these test subjects, the Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group, and they died without tumors. What might be the method of action?" And and the first thought is the medical community looks at aging as an oxidation and an inflammation process, right? So in terms of oxidation, we're an antioxidant 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. In terms of inflammation, uh, you got to be careful with inflammation, the way the FDA sits on inflammation. And I think it's the right thing. What we can share is that we address inflammation due to exercise induced inflammation, right? So we've all had a tough workout or maybe just walked farther than we normally do. And the next day we feel that inflammation. We actually can say FDA allows us to say that we address that type of inflammation. The other types of inflammation the FDA has really equated with the diseases of inflammation. So that's like Alzheimer's and arthritis and cardiovascular disease and cancer, those diseases of inflammation. We're not yet able to speak to those. Um, when you couple that, right, so that checks off this kind of longer lifespan. Now let's talk about the testimonials. Our most consistent testimonial is people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then, like you just said, better sleep that night. We know that sleep is good for our mental, physical, and emotional well being. There's just no doubt about it. It's probably one of the things you focus on when you're coaching. Like, hello, thank you for coaching. And how well do you sleep? Right? Like, that's probably one of the things that you're trying to address because there's nothing more healing or restorative than a really good night's sleep, like that good NREM and REM sleep. So if we're just giving these, people who are taking our product better sleep, then that can explain the head to toe testimonials. But we actually have a new theory, and we've probably been bouncing this around for 4 months. It's got peer reviewed published research to support the concepts, and it really says that the ESS60 molecule, right? So this soccer ball shaped molecule is the boss, right? So a nice, easy acronym. We have too many, but this is at least easy. It's a buffering oxidative stress system. What we know from peer-reviewed published research is that this molecule gets into the mitochondria, right? So we don't have any doubts about that. We also know, even back in the 90s when it was first discovered, it was well understood that could hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of that cage. So negatively charged particles, for those who are kind of aware of the mitochondria, are thinking reactive oxygen species. These are negatively charged particles, and they're the negative byproduct of the mitochondria as it's producing the energy source for your cells, which is ATP, right? So mitochondria, powerhouse of your cell. You got 50 and 5,000. Yeah, 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body, except for hemoglobin. It doesn't have any mitochondria, and it's responsible for generating the power. But just like most power generation, right? You think about a car driving down the street, it's got the exhaust. You think about a power plant, it's got the smokestack. It's got some components that you need to manage. In the case of the mitochondria, it is these reactive oxygen species. And those are the ones that'll do oxidative damage if they're left to their own devices. Inside the mitochondria has glutathione and melatonin. Very interesting. Melatonin, the sleep hormone. And now we've got this ESS60 molecule whose most consistent testimonial is better sleep, right? So now we're putting the pieces fit really well together. And we believe that we understand that the mitochondria can be pushed and worked really hard and maybe overwhelm the glutathione and melatonin that's present, right? And I like to give this analogy. think about Mardi Gras, right? And you're on Bourbon Street. It's the end of Mardi Gras, and the reactive oxygen species are the drunk people running around breaking windows and smashing up cars and pulling down light poles. Those are the reactive oxygen species. And the police, they're the glutathione and the melatonin. So they come in, they handcuff themselves to them, take them off of Bourbon Street. But at some point, if it's overwhelming, then you've got free reactive oxygen species. And that's where this ESS60 molecule can come in and act like a paddy wagon, right? So it just holds on to those reactive oxygen species. It prevents them from doing the damage. It prevents them from breaking the windows and smashing the cars until the glutathione and melatonin can come back in and handcuff them to those reactive oxygen species and get them out. And now here's the reality. If you improve your mitochondrial function in the way that this theory describes, you will get head to toe testimonials, right? So all of these pieces fit together. Now there's one more component, and we've actually added this in the last month, kind of brainstorming with my director of research. And he's always felt that the ESS60 molecule is working as a perturbator, as a hermetic stressor. So one of the things that's important is that reactive oxygen species aren't just damaging cells running around and that need to be managed. They also are a signaling molecule. They're a signaling molecule for our body to take action. So if you dampen it too much, we've all heard about, hey, if I take well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us have heard about, if I take too many antioxidants, it can damper the effects of a good workout. It can damper the positive effects, the positive hormetic effects that we want to have. Well, we believe that not only can this ESS60 molecule hold those reactive oxygen species and prevent them from doing damage, but they're still available as a signaling molecule, right? So you're holding on to it, preventing the damage, and you're also not muting the effects that you actually want those reactive oxygen species to have. And then now we've got a really good theory, working theory of why we're getting head to toe benefits.
Okay, so a lot of things I want to dive into. And number one is in this new era for the last 3 years, and I have to be careful with how I speak about this, that we know that the spike protein is affecting the ACE2 receptor in the liver. Okay, so what is that in charge of? It's in charge of insulin regulation, fluid balance, vasodilation, anti-inflammatory. It is also affecting fertility and ovulation. So when you have been hit with the spike protein, and that covers all of you guys, everybody, I don't care if you're living in Antarctica under an igloo, it has hit everybody, including me. And I actually think I was hit with it yesterday, just being around certain people. So what do I notice? I notice fluid retention, and I notice insulin dysregulation, going hyper and hypoglycemic. I recognize hormonal imbalances, but it is known to increase oxidative stress and increase inflammation. And those two are the things that are going to accelerate age. So it's really interesting that this goes after those two things. Now, the other thing to mention is glutathione and melatonin. Glutathione, you all hear me talk about sulfur-containing foods that we need to stay away from. These are the healthy, wrong foods that used to be healthy for us 5 years ago, but now our systems are backed up because of glyphosate, and that's causing a disruption in our sulfur detox pathways. Well, what does that mean? That means that having our healthy broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower can actually cause water retention and a disrupted gut and a backed up liver. But guess what else is a sulfur-based supplement? Glutathione. So people are taking glutathione to detox, right? Well, glutathione is very unstable. And because it's unstable, when you take the supplement, it's really not going to do much. That's why I do actually recommend using the LifeWave stem cell glutathione patch, because it helps your body produce its own glutathione. But because the MyVitalC is helping with that glutathione working properly, and maybe you can dive into that a little more, That is really important because we need our detox pathways to be working more efficiently than ever. We have more things that are burdening our liver, that spike protein, the radiation, the heavy metal toxicity, the dioxins in our food, the GMOs, the goodness gracious, Fukushima is allowing their radioactive water to leak into the oceans, affecting our fish supply and our iodine sources from Asia, which is why we don't source our iodine from that area of the world. But all of these things are coming at us, and our livers are working harder than ever. So you have to make sure you're sleeping, because sleep is when your brain and your body are detoxing, and you have to have the proper glutathione. Now, the melatonin, I just did a podcast on how most Americans, over 75% of Americans, are looking to dietary supplements as part of their normal routine. Well, the number one supplement that most people are looking to is melatonin. Why? Because they are not sleeping. But when you take melatonin, did you know it actually can shrink your testicles if you're men? And I don't even know what it would do to a woman. But when you take melatonin, then your body says, oh, I don't need to produce any melatonin because I'm getting it from an outside source. So that touches on the hormetic stress or pulsing theory that you were just talking about. But it goes back to sleep and detox, glutathione and melatonin. So if there's any other thoughts you have on that relationship with the boss theory.
Well, you just threw a whole bunch out, and I was taking some notes, so I'll try to address stuff that kind of triggered something for me. So first, you talked about the spike protein and the ACE2 receptor. So what's interesting is that this ESS60 molecule fits in the ACE2 receptor. So when you have this in your system, it has the potential to actually be blocking that receptor. So the impact of whatever the spike protein, however that spike protein entered your body, can be muted, right? So that's actually pretty interesting. Next, you just talked about how you end up with this inflammation, and that's driving aging. That's accelerating the aging process. So we were doing, there's a DNA age test called, I think the website is MyDNAge, right? And I was doing a study with a doctor out of California. He called me. He was excited. He was basically doing a David Sinclair protocol with some of his patients, and they got phenomenal results. There was actually like, I think a couple of the patients got 2 years younger in the time frame of a 6-month progression, right? Where they should have aged 6 months, they actually got 2 years younger. And so we were, doing some funding, paying for the test, doing some, providing some material, and we ended up noticing like the results were not as favorable. And what he ultimately determined, and this has been confirmed actually with conversations with DNAge, is that when you're exposed to that spike protein, so if you have COVID, your DNA ages by 10 years, right at 10 years. Now, I'm a guy looking for a good biological test, right? So I'd very much like to not have a cold or a flu or the COVID impact my age, my biological age, right? But it also makes perfect sense. So who was at most at risk for the COVID virus? And it's those people who were elderly, right? And other comorbidities. But the elderly, if you imagine if you were 80 and you get COVID and that ages you to 10 years, now you're at 90 and you've passed the average lifespan of a human in biological years, like all of these pieces start to fit together, right? So you really do want to manage this. You talked about melatonin. I believe melatonin is mainly produced in so it's in every mitochondria, right? But I believe it's the pineal gland that produces most of the melatonin. It's interesting because pineal cells are the cells that have the most mitochondria in them, right? So they've got the most melatonin in them. And a lot of people look at melatonin as the sleep hormone. In reality, it's the sleep start hormone. And there's a very big difference. And so yes, people are looking for melatonin. Melatonin is a great antioxidant. There's a lot of benefits of melatonin. The challenge is you have to remember that melatonin triggers to your body, hey, it's the starting gun. It's time to go to sleep. So if you take too much or you take it at the right time, imagine you take too much. And a lot of people will report feeling melatonin groggy if they take too much. But imagine if you take too much and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and the firing gun is going off saying, hey, it is now time to sleep. No, no, no. I'm asleep. I'm in a different phase of sleep. This interrupts the sleep. That actually interrupts the sleep. So taking melatonin at the right dose and at the right time is extremely, like, it can be challenging. And then you're dealing with, like, everybody processes melatonin differently. Melatonin for sure is good for mitigating jet lag, right? So to get your body in sync with the local time zone, that's really good. Again, you're playing with the starting gun. You're not playing with the sleeping hormone, right? It's a very different situation. And so I just addressed all of the pieces that you asked, and now I've forgotten your question.